I am really excited to have Mark Cardwell with us today for the latest episode of Black Gives Back, Conversations about Black Philanthropy. Mark Cardwell is Principal Consultant for Cardwell Communications. He currently serves as Vice Chair and Board Member for Ohio Association of Nonprofit Organizations. He's also a member for Americans for the Arts and has participated as an AFTA Expert Consultant. He's currently on the faculty with American for the Arts Project, ArtsU, and he continues to facilitate nonprofit marketing courses offered to AFTA members nationwide. So I'm really excited to have Mark here and as part of the conversation. Mark brings an amazing 30 plus years of experience in nonprofit arts, marketing, operational leadership, executive level management, media, and communications. He also has a tremendous history of board level community service and has been recognized for his work with local and national awards. Mark, I am thrilled to have you at the table for Black Gives Back.
Thank you, Regina. I'm excited to be here. You already know whenever the two of us get together, it's going to be something. So I'm ready to get into it.
Yes. So before we began recording, Mark and I were kind of joking with each other, like, what are we going to talk about? So for so often, you and I talk about outreach and engagement. So this is really more of a continuation of the dialogue I think that we've been having for many years now. I truly respect your marketing expertise, the skill you have for bringing partners and stakeholders together. So I'm really excited for the lens that you bring to fundraising and advancement.
Well, thank you for that. Speaking of that 30 years of experience, just like I think another one of your guests said, I'm not new to this, but I'm true to this, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Man, my goodness. I've been working in the beloved community since my early 20s. And that started with the NAACP and moved into all sorts of other types of community organizations. And ultimately, I began to work in an arts organization as the marketing director. And that's where most of my professional experience really comes from. And that is in marketing and in arts marketing as well. So I have always had a keen interest in seeing the life chances of Black people improve in our communities. And I've I worked at a Black newspaper. I worked at a Black radio station, and I cannot tell you how important those experiences were in helping to ground me in my understanding of the needs of our people. Now that I'm running my own show and doing the kinds of work that I want to do, it's just even more, Regina, is a burning issue of how we protect and preserve our communities and all of the value that's in it. We could talk about the culture and the arts and the music and the beliefs and all of that. And I really feel like at this stage in my life, there's no way I can slow down. I can't slow down. So I'm here to just continue to talk about good ways that we can keep that fight going.
A couple of things. I want to revisit like your opening statement, the beloved community. So I really love and admire the way that the language you use around that, because oftentimes in the nonprofit sector, we talk about the communities we serve, we talk about them as constituents, not as a beloved community. And so I love that you assign that language and that value to the neighbors, to the communities that you serve. In another conversation, Kobe, who you know, we the network is is deep there. But talking about how many nonprofit organizations, whether or not they're arts or social services or education, etc., they physically are located oftentimes in the communities that they serve. So, like, to keep it plain, they're physically located in Black and brown neighborhoods.
Yes.
You have these predominantly white institutions that are located in Black and brown neighborhoods, and yet there's still a disconnect. Even though, like, it's your neighbors, like, go out the front door and it's the people right there. So I love that language really embraces the people that are being served and uplifted.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I got that from Dr. Nicholson when I was working at the King Arts Complex. And I always loved the way that she used it and the way our institution used it, because every time we spoke about our community, we didn't just talk about Black folks, poor folks, this sort of thing, people that are, but this idea of every time we use the language, we embrace ourselves. Yes. We embrace ourselves. And it's important that we do so because our issues and our problems, our pains are so significant. I was talking to somebody not too long ago about different cultures and how some cultures don't have a hug culture, right? Different groups of people have different standards, and I said, but African Americans have a hugging culture, and the reason we have that hugging culture, I believe, is because of the separations that we had to endure, whether we were being separated through enslavement, our families being broken up, separated because of institutional racism and structural inequality that caused our families. We couldn't live in the same development. We had to separate our families. If we had children, we couldn't take care of all of them. We had to separate them. And some had to go live with aunts, some had to live with grandparents, some had to stay. Yes. So when we discuss our issues, my gosh, we ought to hug ourselves. We ought to hold ourselves because we need to be reassured of our value. And if anybody ought to do, we ought to do it ourselves. No one else may ever call us the beloved community, but when we refer to ourselves, we ought to embrace ourselves. Because we have had a significant trauma here in this place. So I do it.
And you kind of touch on the way philanthropy and generosity continues to show up for us. So a couple of the other guests have talked about, they were introduced to philanthropy by, being the recipient of, a couple at the church sliding them some money while they were a college student, or pooling resources, et cetera, to send someone to school. And so you're kind of calling out another example of the way that we take care of our extended family members. And that certainly is, maybe not as much in this current generation. I hesitate to say that though. I think that still is prevalent. That idea of the parent needs some support for whatever reason. The parent needs support. Send the baby over here. We got it. Yes. We're gonna take care of that baby. As a family, collectively, we're gonna make sure that baby is okay. Or those babies, whatever the case may be. So I think that's another form of our generosity that oftentimes goes unnoticed or, undervalued by the larger society.
Yes, 100%. And my experience with in all the different spaces and places, I've seen it over and over again. When you did your talk, your TED talk, your TEDx talk, it really resonated with me. I hadn't thought about it in terms of the way that you brought it out statistically, but experientially, it made sense because I've grown up watching exactly that. Shoot, if it hadn't been for my next door neighbors, I wouldn't have been able to afford my first year in art school, right? And they didn't have to do what they did. They went through their church and got me a scholarship that was, but they could have just said, hey, but they didn't. I didn't go to their church. It was a different church. And see, that's exactly what but that's my neighborhood. And that's my community, and they did that for me. And so, but this is played out over and over again. So the idea that we have generosity is absolutely true. We have the deepest hearts because we understand that we have the deepest pains ourselves. We are empathetic to one another. So we used to say, well, what is driving nobody has to always, and I love what you said about slips you some money. This is everybody doesn't want to have their name, and you'd be surprised. Some of these, little old folk in the church, and they slip you, some money. My mom, may she rest in peace. My mom was doing that. And I was like, hey, you slip me some money. She'd go to church. Right. She'd see a young and up and coming young man who was getting ready to go off to college. She'd say, come here, let me give you a little something, and that sort of thing. And never look for the name on the placard, right? But if you really want to understand whether or not we are givers, you just have to grow up in this. Absolutely. And we can move mountains when we get ready.
Yeah. And saying that, like, that you have to grow up in this, it just makes me want to pause, take a moment and pause for the cause. Like, I'm so glad, so thankful for the community that I grew up in. I mean, just absolutely, and certainly, like, we didn't have all the things, so we certainly needed that resource pooling, we relied on that. But I am so grateful for the role that Black generosity and Black giving has played in my life.
I could go on and on about that.
Yeah, right.
Because we could go back. We might. I say, don't make me run around here. But I tell you, even growing up, my father fished, and some neighbors didn't fish, but they grew things, right? So there was an exchange, there was that. And man, I tell you, you just never had a problem with anything. Guy down the road, he had a bigger land than most in the neighborhood, and they put a fairly good amount of vegetables in there. And now, Regina, we struggle to get people to come out to the community garden and be a part and all that. But this used to just, I don't know, it was normal to me, and then, you see the bags going back and forth over the fence. You give me tomatoes, I'll give you corn, that sort of thing. And it just is, and really, honestly, it is in us to be communal and to share our resources. And so when you begin to talk about Black philanthropy, there's something there to tap into. Absolutely. There's something there to tap into. And although we get to your marketing piece, it's going to be about, how you take those cultural cues and bring them and port them into, this element, the philanthropy, the giving in this type of a way, because it's already in us to do so.
Yeah. So that's a great segue, actually. So knowing that, like, we know we're generous, et cetera, but there still is this idea that Black people don't give. But your career has been more on, like, the marketing side, the sales side, the enterprise development side of things. And have you ever had a conversation like within your work, within your industry, like, oh, Black people just don't buy.
Sure,
They don't
sure.
consume. Like, do you
Oh my
have
gosh,
those
yes.
same conversations?
Oh
Or,
my gosh.
or is it more of a thing of, no, we know that they have money to spend. We know there are resources there. And like you said, kind of tapping into the cultural cues, maybe?
Yeah. 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 100%. I mean, listen, at a certain point, it gets to be nonsensical when you have, white organizations suggest that Black people don't buy. Because it's clearly wrong-headed. You can see our purchasing power. Now,
Yeah.
many years ago, when I was working in media, um, you didn't have a lot of statistics that talked about our purchasing power, and nobody was even, trying to gauge or measure it, at least not in any big way. But as the years went on, and in advertising, one of the things that began to happen is as the country began to get more diverse, ad agencies needed to know how to communicate with diverse audiences, and that's when they began to recognize and understand the buying power. When you up to this point, they had just been talking to everybody, and then every now and then, someone with a diverse background might buy the product, and they were like, "Well, whatever." But then when things began to dry up and then they started looking, maybe we should look a little closer and see if some of these
Yeah.
segments can actually grow. And so sure enough, they began to find out that if you communicate with instead of at communities of color, they're just like anybody. They become brand loyal, they purchase, and they have purchasing, and they purchase is consistent. We need the same things you need on a regular basis too. So all of the state, so yeah. Now, flash forward to today, where it's no secret that we have purchased. So I don't hear that as much. Now we get it to the place to where what folks want to do is what exploit the
Yes.
purchasing power of the Black community and communities of color. And so now they just want to kind of some of what's going on with DEI right now is they want to put a statement out and all of that. They want to have the veneer, they want to have that, and then they want to see if that will work, that will suffice.
Yeah.
And if will that do it? But nobody wants to have systemic internal change in their organization to actually be an honest broker about their efforts to develop an engagement with the communities of color. Because that's hard, and it makes you have to do some introspection, some work on yourself. And they don't want to work on themselves, they just want to
Yeah.
you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
did I answer your question, or did I go off on a tangent? I hope I
No, you
answered.
did absolutely answer the question, and it's no tangents here. It's just a conversation.
Okay.
So I mean, again, we talk about all these different things so often. I'm really, I want to get a little bit into how Black-led organizations, the work we do, as it relates to engaging our beloved communities. And you've seen that, from your experience. I've seen some of that as well. And so this conversation, and this series of conversations, isn't necessarily about let's prove to, predominantly white organizations that we really give. It's not so much about that. It's more maybe prove to ourselves, have some tough conversations within the Black community, with other Black professionals about the way that we lead, where we excel, where we miss the mark as it relates to community engagement. I kind of want to move into that, especially as it relates to arts and culture. And a little bit like the stewardship of our culture. So there's absolute value in our culture, not just financial value, but the resources, the creativity, the ingenuity, the innovation, etc., the styles, trends, all the things. what
Yeah.
music, the fine arts, etc. And sort of like I don't know, the responsibility
Yeah.
that Black organizations have to uphold that value, to market that value,
Yes.
protect that value.
Well, the thing that how I feel about that, about leadership, in the way that you're talking about it, is that you got a couple of choices nowadays. You can be a person of color, and you can completely sell out your community, because here's the reality: if the power brokers have an idea of how they'd like to govern organizations, communities of color, one of the first things that they do is try to find somebody that looks like them, but is down with us, right? Someone that can be the face and play both sides. Come back to the office and we'll tell you what our goals are and what we want to do. Now you go back and interpret that to the community and kind of smooth it over with them and tell them everything is okay and all of that. We see that. Not Regina, the reality is we see that all over the place. This is just a tactic. This is how business gets done. When the Black Lives Matter movement shows you what happens when Black folks get riled up and decide that actually we're actually concerned about something. The powers that be really do everything to make sure that people stay pacified. So leaders oftentimes are put in place because they will do their best to pacify the people instead of empower the people. So I told you at the top I was going to tell you how I feel about it.
Yes.
And we have to hold our leaders accountable when we see them not working in the best interest of the beloved community. And it's not really hard to tell. One of the things that their fruit tells on them. The fruit shows you exactly what it is. Everybody's in different stages of development leadership wise, but honestly, if you've been in an organization for 10 years and you cannot speak to any appreciative, positive change that you have brought to the community that you serve, then you're not there for the community. You're there for someone else. And so I mean, I don't know how to I'm not going to sugarcoat it. That's what it is. And so it's people like you and me that have to say, enough is enough. And, we have to let them know that it's not going to be acceptable anymore.
Yeah. So how do you get rid of that type of leadership? You're not they're not elected. You're not going to the polls and voting them in directly.
Yeah. I mean, really seriously, you just have to start calling things out. You have to say that there's a lot of uncomfortable conversations. You have to just begin to be that person that's willing to call incongruity out. For example, if you see, I was talking to somebody, there's a major law firm in our town that law firm works to further the efforts of the FOP. They are the law firm of the Fraternal Order of Police nationally, the national FOP. Now, that same law firm is headed by an individual that has run the Black arts and culture organizations in our town for many, many years, and continues to, if you would say, this person is no longer day to day, they no longer this, they no longer that, that's fine, but they have a shadow that looms large, right?
Yeah.
And their desires,
a legacy.
Yeah, and a legacy, and their desires for the area are still taken into account. What has happened is when the voices needed to rise up to say, I don't know, that seems a little bit incongruent. There seems to be something that maybe we need to address, or just talk about. And then when you begin to see the organization shift and change in ways that it's no longer growing, it certainly is shrinking, and you can see it. So it's not something that is that's not behind closed doors. But you have to have savviness and political savvy and community kind of engagement savvy to know what buttons to push. Part of the problem with us is not having a black press any longer that can push some of those, but can write those exposés and speak truth to power. And that also is in large part by design. And so you have to really, really, really be strategic. Because one of my mentors said power, it's not his quote, but he was teaching us young people coming up here in Columbus. He said, you have to understand that power concedes nothing without, a struggle. We have to be willing to get in that mix and fight. We have to be willing to be in the struggle, but we keep trying to be, I don't want to say, but my goodness, something seems, but I got to think about my career, and man, this person is really, really powerful. And if they can make a phone call and I can be out of a job, this sort of thing is real. So you have to count the costs and think about, think about the beloved community and what are you willing to do to preserve and protect it?
Yeah. Well, now you have me thinking about this idea of like doing the work. So oftentimes as Black fundraisers, Black professionals, Black donors, we want to give to like predominantly white institutions, et cetera, whether or not that's our alma mater or the local museum, the local, gallery, whatever, the local park, et cetera. You want to give, but the legacy and the history of that organization has been exclusive, et cetera. And you expect them to do some work. Like we talk about this quite a bit within the nonprofit sector right now. Oh, the organization has work to do around diversity, equity, and inclusion. You have work to do the work. I'm curious now, based on what you were saying, what is the work that Black-led organizations need to do?
Yeah.
Because they're really in the same boat.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I'm in the middle of, really, studying out how many of our organizations are responding to, the context in which they're working in, and I recognize something, Regina, that this is kind of showing itself. Many of the leaders do not understand the historical context in which they are working. So they came to an organization, they became the executive director, right? Or something like that, whether it's, like we said, social service or arts or whatever it is. And maybe the organization has some organizational history, right? But that still doesn't tell them about the actual history of that organization as it relates to the context of social injustice and structural inequality. In my study, we're talking about red line districts, but wherever the place is, you need a much bigger understanding of the context in which you're working, so that you understand the environment completely. And here's the reason why. Your municipality and your power structure, they do know it.
Yeah.
They understand that your area, that's the goodie bag area. We've been priming that area for 25, 35 years to get ready for development, right? But you came in at year 10 thinking that you were an arts organization and you were going to exist for 100 years doing this wonderful work for the community. right?
Yeah.
But your plan and their plan are not the same. But here, it's okay for you to do what you're doing, so long as you're, keeping the value, the property values up. It's a nice look. You got your lawns are cut. Everything is nice. You guys are keeping the energy, the good positive energy in the area. That's great for development, right? That's what arts does. Yeah.
The pre-gentrification.
Yeah. So, but you don't know that that's what you're doing. You think
Right.
that they gave you the building. They helped you. They helped you get the building so that you could, because they cared about your mission, and they don't. They don't care about your mission.
Yeah.
They need someone in that building that's going to keep the look. Now, maybe you do understand that. Maybe you do. But maybe you don't understand how redlining impacted the property values and all of the health of your community, and how this whole wave of gentrification, this cycle that is in. And when you began to create your business plan, your organizational strategic plan, did you write in it what stage of gentrification you're coming in at, and how you intend strategically, business-wise, operationally, to deal with all the ripple effects over the next 25 years? Did you do that? And the answer is no, nobody does that.
Right.
But the city does.
Right.
The Columbus Partnership does. They know exactly what they intend to get out of this area over the next 25 to 50 years. We're the ones that are working in this small little area. And then when we finally find out that we're getting some pressures, we're losing our neighborhood is changing and all of this sort of stuff, then we want to get to the table, and it's been way too late by that time to have any impact.
Yeah. And so I'm kind of coupling that with the fact that many Black-led organizations were founded in response to some sort of either trauma, exclusion, injustice, etc. And so, I think you're definitely onto something and hitting the nail right on the head. Like, we absolutely have to be aware of that history. We can't separate it. We can't afford to separate our mission from the founding history.
Yes. If you open up a dance studio in the Near East Side of Columbus, if you open up a dance studio and you're thinking, I believe dance is important, right? Right. And it is. Dance is important. It's expressive and it's important. You cannot get away from, and you shouldn't, if you want to do this for a long time, if you think this is something that the community needs for a while, you have to have that historical context. You have to recognize that you exist inside of a ripple of racism. That's how you exist. Maybe you are, like you say, I love this idea that you are actually, the so-called gap that you're filling is actually a reaction to some injustice, more than likely, right? Possibly. So when you think that as arts people or as social service agencies, that you're working without that bigger, broader context of historical racism, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. And we got to get 50 to 100 years out on our planning. If we don't do that, we're never going to see it coming. It keeps hitting us. We're never going to see it coming. Yeah. I was in a thing the other day. A friend of mine asked me to participate in a business roundtable where young lady is running for governor, and I agreed because of the person that was asking me. Normally, I probably wouldn't have done. And I sat there and community folk were asking community folk questions, But to be honest, I've been around, so I didn't say a thing. I was a little embarrassed about that because I didn't have anything to say. Mainly because I'm at the stage in the place where I recognize that that's nice and all, but it's not really what's going to create change in our neighborhood, in our community. And the only thing I want to know from people who are white and in power at this point is when the appropriations come, how much are we going to get? I'm really not interested in whether or not you believe my life matters. I'm really not that interested in whether or not you agree with the values that we have, that sort of thing. I just want to know, if you want my vote, how much are you going to bring back? How much money are we going to get? How much services are we going to? I just don't want to. I don't want to. Play anymore with that. A mentor of mine, and I'll let you know. Sorry, a mentor of mine once said that politics is who gets what, how much, and when. And if we all, Regina, if we all remember that, whether it's in the corporate politics or church politics or politics. That's what it is. That's all it is. Yeah. So let's just cut to the chase and talk about the money. Talk about, the resources.
I appreciate that, because I think too often, as leaders of, community organizations, Black-led organizations led by people of color, we get caught up in the game of proving our worth, proving our value, proving our mission, like convincing people, like, yes, Black lives really do matter. You should agree with us. And, yes, hungry people really do need food, and you should agree with that. And children really do need engagement, and they need books at age 3, etc. You should agree with this. And so proving the value of the mission, I think, sometimes gets in the way. And I'm glad you called that out, especially for Black organizations and Black serving organizations. We really don't have time to play the niceties. Like, let's move beyond that. It doesn't matter if someone sees the value or not. The value is there. If you want my vote, if you want my support, you want my consumer dollars, this is what I anticipate.
Exactly. I mean, 100%. And if we all begin to kind of really think in these terms, it'll help us save us some time and some frustration. In fact, one of the things, the reason I'm doing the study that I'm doing, which is, has to do with understanding how BIPOC arts and culture organizations are faring across the country that are located in historically redlined districts. One of the reasons I'm doing that study is I sit on a national committee, and they're looking to try to do better with their, it's a 5-year study that they do every year. And they want to do better with their outreach to BIPOC arts and culture organizations. And anyway, as we're helping to develop communications and questions that will end up in some of the surveying that's going to happen, I just felt some kind of way, Regina, about even the question. How do you question an arts organization that exists in a historically redlined district? We literally we exist inside the whole context of structural racism. And then you're going to ask me, what is my value to the community? Can I prove, like to your point, whether or not my organization is, this is an economic study, able to generate and create tourism for the city that I'm in? And I'm like, we're here for, I'm thinking about where I used to work. We're not here to do that. We're here to keep the souls and the psyche of the people together from fracturing and spinning off into the ether because of the structural racism that they've had to endure all of these generations. We're here to preserve the culture because it's under attack. So here you're asking us, like what you're saying, to prove, that what we do has value. Well, you'll never believe it, because when you see Black faces, you don't see what I see. When you look at our Black children, let's just call it what it is. You don't see the little cherub that I see. You see a little troublemaker. I see a little precocious child with a lot of energy that we're just going to have to keep working with him, because he's going to be a superstar one day. That's not what you see. You see a threat. And so I know that you don't see any of the work that we do through our lens. And so even asking us the question is offensive, because everything that we do for the beloved community is designed to not only embrace us, but to heal us.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to say, well, what kind of economic impact do you think that has? I mean, how am I supposed to measure that? Right.
Right.
You know, I'll tell you one thing I can tell you. If we didn't do the work, if these arts organizations and these social service organizations all around the country weren't doing the work that they're doing, there'd be a lot more things burned down. You know, there'd be a lot more trouble in the streets, because a lot of these spaces and places are where folks go to decompress, because they have somebody there that can hear them. Whether you're sitting with a social service worker, a social worker that can understand you because they look like you, and that moment of interaction and engagement that you get with them helps you.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, the other thing that comes to mind was that just turn the lens just a little bit, not just what would be burning, you know, what riots would be happening without some of these organizations, but also like what beautiful art would not exist. Yeah. And I think about here locally in Columbus, Ohio, like Amina Robinson, you know, she's a beloved, you know, artist, and she's been embraced in the like more traditional art community, more mainstream art community. But thinking back to when she could like, so just a little backstory. I was a volunteer for a local art gallery here, the Urban Cultural Arts Foundation, which operates the oldest Black-owned, longest-running Black-owned, independently Black-owned art gallery in the state. And so talk about reactionary, a reactionary organization. That organization was created because Black artists simply were not permitted to exhibit at the Columbus Museum of Art. Like just as a matter of policy, no, you can't come here. You can't exhibit here. You might not even really be able to enter, and you most definitely aren't going to put any of your stuff on the walls. And so with that in mind, thinking about artists like Amina Robinson, like Grandpa Smokey, you know, like some of these greats, like Benjamin Crumpler, you know, some of these greats, Barbara Shavis, you know, so I just start going down the list here that didn't at some point didn't have a place to exhibit, didn't have a place to create, just didn't have those resources. And so we can talk about like, oh, you know, how bad things might be, you know, how contentious race relations might be without some of this work, but just think about how boring and how less beautiful the world would be.
Yeah, and the thing is, that's what gentrification does, is it creates boring communities, because the artists and the people, the vitality and the life that you thought you were buying into are ultimately, you know, priced out. Here's my at this stage of my life, Regina, I am really for Black people doing for Black people. And here's the reason. The Museum of Art, for example, I believe struggles with how, even yet today, with how to present Black art without this almost merchandising effect. I happen to know one of the artists that you named is deathly afraid that their work will end up in the Columbus Museum of Art, their body of work. And they don't want that. They don't want it there. And I'm thinking, man, I really, when I see events and activities there, and I see that down the road, it's an event, you could have had that event in the community. And I get it. Everybody wants to be DEI and all of that, but the truth of the matter is, when it was critical and crucial, when these artists were forming and growing, you weren't there for them. And I'm just saying, when I was an art student at CCAD, there was a handful of Black students there. We begged that they would have Black artists come and talk to us, because we couldn't see ourselves in the art that was being presented to us every day. And there's all these artists coming in, but none of them looked like us. None of them had come from our experiences. And I'm just over it, Regina. I'm just over it. I really honestly believe that as much as we can do for ourselves and by ourselves, that we need to do that. If we really expect to maintain the value of those things that we hold dear, that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, absolutely. That ownership in this conversation series is partly me trying to answer the call to action that I feel like W.E.B. Du Bois put forth hundreds of years ago, for Black people to exercise strategic unified philanthropy. And so we have to be strategic about the way that we use our resources, our financial resources, our volunteerism, our advocacy, our dollars, our ingenuity, our creativity. And I'm right there with you, because this is not about, I'm not at all interested in teaching predominantly white organizations or even Black-led organizations, how to exploit and extract resources from Black donors. That's not at all what I'm interested in. I'm just very much interested in celebrating the giving and generosity that's inherent to us, the genius of our culture, and also interested in talking about how we protect it. How do we, as Black people, as Black donors, how do we invest in our Blackness?
That's the $64 million question.
Yeah.
And I'm whenever we get it figured out, I'm all for it. I'm at that table with you. I would love to see the creation of a foundation that it's several varieties of foundations that exist specifically for the good of the beloved community. If I see that before I'm out of here, I'll be so happy, because I'm not telling you what I think. I'm telling you what I know. If we don't do it for ourselves, it's not going to happen. We've been in this fight long enough. And I've been in corporate. I've seen, I've brought, hey, this community thing is going, you ought to support it. Can you, support it with their, I've gotten raised money, for things. And I'm just over it. I'm just over it, because even at the end of the day, even after they get engaged with your community, it doesn't stick. It doesn't stick. There's this, desire to continue to lord it over us and not give us our real due and say our autonomy to direct our organizations is another big issue with regards to how things go, and so I'm just over it. I'm just I would really, when you get it figured out, you let me know, and I'll be at the table with you.
Yes. So for our listeners, if you get this figured out, reach out to me, reach out to Mark, and we'll come together. I'm joking, but I know that we both are serious about that, and just kind of been playing around. This series of conversations is forcing me to think more seriously about like a donor school. Not teaching people how to raise money, but like something for Black people. Like, one, do you know we're philanthropists? Do you know we're donors? And this is what it looks like. And this is how we can be strategic. There's a donor bill of rights. Like, did you know that? And this is what you can anticipate when you give money. This is how you show up. If you really want to see change in the idea that the nonprofit sector in so many ways should be the champion for a lot of social change, and so if you really want to see that, you can, do it in the voting booth, but make a donation. Go to the gala, buy a ticket, talk to the CEO, set up a meeting with the CEO, go to a board meeting, join the board committee, join a volunteer committee, lead a volunteer,
Absolutely.
A volunteer effort, etc. And so I think teaching Black people, one, how to grow wealth so that your wealth can then be used to advance the causes that you care about. Like, we need the money. Like, these causes need the money, to be sure. And so we need you to be wealthy so you can support the causes, and so that sort of this system of like cooperative economics, as it were, like the community will support you. Now you support the community, and there's this beautiful system. But some sort of school, like, this is how we can be strategic about this. This is how we can like own our communities. This is how we, like you said, if there's going to be, set asides, if there's going to be gentrification, then like I want my part, whatever the set aside is, I want my percentage.
That's it. That's it. And and it doesn't have to be about much else than that. It doesn't really have to be about it, because really, to be honest with you, to them, it ain't really that. They'll appreciate that. They'll appreciate that. So they don't have to make themselves uncomfortable to try to make you feel like they feel like, they understand and care.
Right.
I know you. Let's dispense with that. You don't have to, and they'll breathe a sigh. Oh, thank you.
Yes.
You want to, so you guys just want to know how much? Yes. All right, like, now we can talk.
Exactly. So like, I can imagine that there are like allies out there. They're like, no, I really want to help you. I'm really genuine. And so then obviously we're not talking about those people.
No,
and then also obviously those people don't control the power structures. Those people are making the policy decisions.
They will not be allowed to make those.
Exactly. So, recognize that we're making some generalizations here, but but they're based in reality. And of course, there are always exceptions to the rule. But you're absolutely right. And I think there's value in calling that out. Everybody's not interested in diversity and inclusion. Everybody's not interested in equity. Some of it is just for show.
I mean, probably more than you think. And depending upon the area where you live and so on and so forth. I mean, we have to have some, what is the word? Know how to read the room. Have some intelligence, some emotional intelligence about this. When you're sitting around the table, you can pretty much figure out who is like really fed up with all of this talk, but it's just, I got to be here, so I'm here. Look, it doesn't matter, because our demands need to be our demands, period. And so it doesn't matter. And so anyway, so that's one part of this conversation. But at the end of the day, I really believe in self-sufficiency more and more as I've been on both sides. We keep fooling ourselves in believing that we control things, and we don't even have any assets. I'm really beginning to understand, this idea of, maybe you're not on the plantation because you don't work for free, but you still sharecropping. And so you still don't own, and we have to begin to understand the systems of our country's economic engines, and really begin to look at some of these things and say, well, wait, maybe this is just the same thing. Maybe this is not really that different. I'll let you go, but I had an epiphany many years ago. I was working somewhere, and I was working it was a part-time job, so it was my second job. And so I had a professional job, and I had one of these gigs on the weekends. Anyway, I was doing something, and I said, well, I'm doing pretty good, making pretty good money, bringing it home, bought a house, all this sort of thing. And then I realized, but if one of my ancestors, and this is a good thing, just exercise to do, if one of my formerly enslaved ancestors, walked into the room and asked me, wow, you bought a house, it's a great house, you own it? Yeah. Well, own it, right? I own it,
Right.
kind of, sort of, because like it's going to take me all the rest of my life to pay it. And so the bank is charging me interest. And so over the life of it. So, but yeah, I own it. What he say, he'd probably say, you know, that's not where I come from. That's not ownership. That mean you don't actually own it. The bank own it. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess, but, and then I said, I happened to, one of the jobs I happened to be doing, funny thing, I was folding towels. And I'll tell you, it was an epiphany. I was folding towels. I was a manager, but part of the job was I was folding towels. And I happened to, Regina, I looked at the tag. The tag said 100% cotton. And I had in front of me a huge table, a stacked mound of towels. And I said, if my ancestor walked in here, asked me, what you doing? Well, part-time job. I fold these towels and I get all the other people to do what they're supposed to do too. He said, these, and I said, boy, he just said, we ain't really come that far. Mm-hmm. We ain't really come that far. And I think that stays with me when that picture I had, and I realized I keep looking at myself. I said, and I see us, and I know we think we've arrived, but you in a system. You're in a system that repeats in patterns, a certain overlay, where the most powerful, and then there's us, and then they keep us in a place of non-ownership, and they don't mind you thinking that you got something, so long as you keep coming and you got to go to the company store, or you know, it's the same. It's the same two-step. We're supposed to see it, but sometimes we can't. So
that self-sufficiency is so important. And oftentimes we lose sight of that when we're trying to prove our mission, trying to prove our worth, prove our equality. And that self-sufficiency is key. That whether or not it's like owning your business, owning your land, owning your communities, owning your philanthropic dollars, and making sure your charitable dollars are pooling right back into your community and meeting the needs, your immediate needs.
Yes, because if you've got anywhere in that value chain, other people, you've missed it. You've missed it. And I can look back and we can all ask ourselves this question. My great-great-grandfather owned a farm, owned his land, and owned everything that he had, built his house. He didn't owe nobody anything. He built it, right? Owned the animals, you know, everything that grew out of the ground. He didn't have to pay anybody for it. That's my great-great-grandfather, right? And I look at myself and I say, I'm running to the store. We talking about food prices. We just, oh Lord Jesus, we can't pay. Oh my goodness, gas prices. We got to, you know. I wonder how far have we come, really how far?
Yeah, that is a great place to wrap up our conversation. How far have we come? Would our ancestors be proud of us? Would we get the nod of approval from our ancestors? And are we exercising self-sufficiently? I can't say it. I mean, are we exercising self-sufficiency to the max as much as we possibly can?
Right.
That is, I thank you. That is an amazing call to action, amazing food for thought. I appreciate it. Mark Cardwell, you know, we've been friends for a long time. I appreciate you, sir. I appreciate your participation in the Black Gives Back conversation.
Thank you, Regina. Thank you for the opportunity for me to be open and honest and share with you how I feel about it. And you can, anytime you need anything, just let me know. I'm here.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you.